get started. Dear God, we're so grateful to be in this room with just incredible people who love you and want to serve you. God, I pray that during this time you would energize us, God, and that you would give us new eyes and new ears to maybe pick something up that'll help us this year as we serve in club. I pray that you would just strengthen each one of us. Many of us have things going on with our families that are a distraction, God, but I pray that you would empower us and strengthen us so that we can pour out love to the children in our clubs. In Jesus' name, amen. So if everyone could get a paper and a card that are on that chair, that will help you. I'm going to introduce myself just as we get started. My name is Jennifer House, and I grew up in a Baptist minister of music's home. I've been in church my whole life. I was actually called to ministry at an early age at 16 years old, loved kids. My whole life, I've always loved kids and poured into kids. In college, I was a children's intern at my church. I got a degree to be a teacher. Along the way, I met my husband. He was involved in college ministry, campus outreach, which is evangelism, discipleship ministry. I was as well. We were both on staff with that. We were able to meet, get married. We did college ministry for a few years. Then God called him and me, because if one, it's together. We feel like God was leading us to do the same thing, evangelize and disciple, but in the local church. And everyone that my husband talked to said, well, you need to go to seminary if you're going to start a church and be a pastor. So we went to seminary. He actually attended the school. I was there supporting him through that. We started a college church. He went to Southwestern in Fort Worth, Texas, and we started a college church at the University of Texas at Arlington. And then after seminary, we worked. I was a children's pastor in a church, and he was the associate pastor. Well, then we ended up back in Georgia. And how that happened, the schools that we worked at with campus outreach, one of them was West Georgia. And a lot of the men that my husband had led to Christ and discipled were Gwinnett County football coaches. And they said, you said you're starting a church, why don't you come back to Georgia to start a church? Well, I grew up in Miami, Florida. I'm a big city girl. I went to college in Birmingham, Alabama, Sanford. We had been in some small towns, and I did not want to be in a small town again. And I said, well, if there's not a super Target, I'm not going. which is hilarious now looking back. But the Lord led us to Grayson, Georgia. This was in 2003, and it was tiny then. It was just started. The high school had just opened up. It was just growing. And so he's like, well, I don't think there's a super Target in Grayson. But we flew out, we looked around, and we drove to Snellville, and it took 7 minutes. That was the Lord. But it took 7 minutes to get to Snellville. But I'm thinking, okay, this is all right. Anyway, the Lord led us to Grayson. We started the church in our living room, then we met in a daycare, and then we met in a renovated warehouse. Miss Cheryl was part of our church when we were in the warehouse way back then, and then the Lord led us and provided abundantly to buy land, build a building in 2008. Do y'all remember 2008? So that was a miracle from God. And anyway, while we were starting the church, I was a school teacher. I taught at Grayson Elementary, 2nd grade. So we were starting the church in Grayson. My children were kindergarten and 1st grade, back to back, as we were starting the church. And so I had the experience of being a teacher. How many of you in the room have been a school teacher? So that's a lot of us. So we know that a lot of what we do in Good News Club is classroom management. So I think engaging children is a super fun name for classroom management, honestly, because that is what we're doing. But I do feel like over the years, And if you've taught school, you know you're always I remember my first year teaching, you get in there and you start teaching, and then it's working fine. And then by December, nothing you've done works anymore. So then you have to come back in January. I'm talking about classroom management, and reinvent the wheel. They got bored of whatever worked in August, September, October. And so now we got to reinvent the wheel. We got to re-engage these kids. And so in January, I would come back and do things a little bit differently. So now I'm going to go back to my family a little bit. So now our children, when we started the church, they were 6 and 4. They're 25, and our son works with us, which is amazing at the church. He does student ministry and our production. And then our daughter is married. She got married last year and is in grad school at the University of North Georgia. And then along the way, I didn't tell you this yet, but God gave us a surprise baby. And she's a freshman in high school now. But the other kids were 9 and 11, and she was a baby, which actually helped get me, I shouldn't say helped because I loved teaching, but it moved my profession a little bit. I couldn't figure out how to teach school, volunteer at the church, volunteer at Good News Club, everything else. And so the church was able to hire me, which was a nice thing. And so now I'm the women's minister at the church, and I love to get to do all of that kind of stuff. We started Good News Club at Grayson, and I can't remember what year, whenever it started. It was the 4th club in Gwinnett, and I got to be a part of that, and I've loved it. So I know firsthand how it goes. So we're going to kind of follow this, and I kind of might skip around. But the main thing I want you to know today is when you're thinking about children, if you want them engaged, 2 things: know their name and know their thing. Their thing. Do they play basketball? Do they love video games? Do they dance? Do they do piano? Are they into art? Whatever it is, know their name and know their thing. So what are you gonna have to do to know their name and know their thing? And this goes with adults too. Know their name and know their thing. So the name tags really help. If your club doesn't do name tags, do the name tags. Know their name, know their thing. If you need a cheat sheet, a notebook where you can write down their name and the thing that they like, as you pray over your kid, know their name and know their thing. And if you can do that, that's 90% of the work. Knowing their name and knowing their thing. So, the first part of our note says, let's squash distraction. So in your club, and so some of you have big clubs and some of you have small clubs. Okay, but most of these principles will apply to both, but just if it's not, I kind of run everything through how we did club. Back in the day, we would have 100 kids at a club. And so we had to really get creative. You know, then post-pandemic, it was smaller. But now things are growing again, I know. So I'm kind of thinking through that. So basically, you have different roles in your club. You have your large group teacher, you have small group teachers. Sometimes a large group teacher is also the Bible story teacher, is also a small group leader. I know how that goes. But just kind of think of it this way. You have a host. So your host would be the one welcoming the kids, getting them to their small group, knowing their name, knowing their thing. The host is energetic, they're lively, they can put things together really quick, they can capture the kids' attention. I always have a few large group games I can do with kids in a second. So one of them I'm going to do with y'all, and if you have mobility issues, don't worry about it. We're not going to be running, but we are going to be moving around a little bit. But this is my game that we're going to play. And it's Would You Rather. Okay? And some of you do this. But you can pull this off. I've done this with 500 children. I've done it with 20 children. Either way, it works every time, and they love it. Okay? So this is a game. It's Would You Rather. So put your books down on the ground. It's going to be easy, okay? So I'm going to say, would you rather, and I'm going to give you one choice. You would walk to this side of the room. If it's another choice, you walk to this side of the room. And the kids always say, what if it's both? And then I usually say, you have to decide. But you're really energetic with them, okay? So I'm thinking about adults in the room today. So know your audience, right? And you have to, your kids, if you know their name and know their thing, it's a little bit easier. If you're guessing, it's a little bit harder. Okay, but with you in mind, would you rather have a Starbucks coffee or a Dunkin' Donuts coffee? So stand up and go to the side, and you have to choose. You don't see, that's what they say. That's what they say. Okay, so we have many more. Okay. Now I know the answer to this, but I've got to do it. Georgia Bulldogs, Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I know the answer, but I just want to say Georgia Bulldogs, Georgia Tech. Oh, and you're in the middle. You're neither one. Are you both? Michigan. Okay, so, and then this is when you make a joke about Georgia Tech, but I'll spare you. Okay. Would you rather on a vacation, would you choose like tropical or beach, or would you choose like mountains and snow? Tropical, beach, mountains, and okay, we'll just do one more. But this is a big question for my family. If you were going to choose a sweet, would it be like chocolate M&Ms or would it be like sour or Skittles? Okay, y'all can all come have a seat. Thank you for participating in my little game. Yes. Thank Okay, so do y'all see how fun that was and how easy it was? You can do it off the hip. Like a lot of times, I actually made this list during Pastor Drew's talk. I'm so sorry about that. But you can do it at any time. You can in 30 seconds. And then the kids love things like McDonald's or Chick-fil-A. Just think about what kids like. Video games, playing outside. You know, and you do get to know the kids. You see they're getting energy out. But I do it if I need something really fun right away, or if it's time to go, but there's like 5 more minutes till carpool, that's an easy game to do. That's a fun large group game. Another large group game would be 4 corners. Y'all know this, it's so easy. It's just the 4 things around the room. I also, and this is part of my growing up. So growing up, you know, I was in church my whole life, and we had the funniest high school guy. His name was Alfred Silva. I loved him. He was so fun, the most energetic. But instead of Simon Says, he would play Christian Says. Christian says, reach up. Christian says, touch your shoulders. Christian says, touch your knees. Touch your hips. You know, but he was so funny. And so that was a game that I still remember today. He was so captivating and engaging. So you could also train your high school volunteers to help lead these group games. There are other large group games that I'm sure you could come up with. One that's always fun is I would have the kids, you walk around the room and you say mingle, 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 and then I say 5. So they have to get in a group holding hands with 5 people, you know? And if you don't get in a group of 5, you're out. I mean, it's simple little things, but you can also Google large group games. But just in the back of your mind, have some fun things you can do with these kids. So you have a host who's energetic, classroom understands classroom management. What we have to keep in mind, these kids have been at school all day. They've had to sit still all day. Their favorite part of school was recess when they got to run around. So I know we want them to come to club and sit down, but some of their little bodies cannot sit down. And this is I have new insight. So my baby, she's now 14, but she diagnosed with ADHD at 4 years old. We avoided medicine all the years, but starting high school, she's like, Mom, I really need, I can't concentrate, I can't get my work done. So we started medicine, which kids on medicine, they crash at 3 or 4 o'clock. And I know what the crash feels like now. She gets in the car, she's hungry because the medicine makes her not want to eat all day. And she's going off the meds. And I hate it, and I might get to change. I'm going to meet with the doctor Monday about it, but that's just the reality of where some of our kids are. After school, they're in all different situations, so we just have to keep it in mind. So you have a host that's energetic, has some games that can get the kids going. Then we have small group leaders. Many of you would be considered small group leaders. A lot of you work jobs full time. You come to club, you're tired. Some of y'all have teachers that volunteer at your schools. You've got to keep that in mind too, that they have worked with kids all day long. They're tired. We want you to be successful, which is one of the reasons I gave you the Convo Card. The Convo Card, these are just, this is simple and it's not rocket science, but some of you are a little more shy, a little less experienced with children, and so this is just something that you can have laminated on the top of your folder or attached to it. And so if you're trying to get to know kids, so the kids are coming into club, you can say, what's your favorite game, your favorite sport, your favorite activity, what's your favorite cereal, silliest face. You can do this as a large group and they all take a turn. I mean, not large group, small group, sitting around, they all take a turn answering these questions. Or this is something you do one-on-one with kids. Who did you come to, it should say club, who did you come to church with or club with? My name is, my favorite food is, I work at. You could even have this on a sheet and have your kids fill it out the first day of club so you could get to know them. But just you want to engage with kids. Another thing about boys in particular, they do not like looking at you eye to eye and having conversations. Raise your hand if you have a son. I learned early on, they don't like looking eye to eye. Mom, so many questions, leave me alone. What they like to do is shoot the basketball side by side, driving in the car. Men might be like that in general, I'm not sure, but that was intimidating the eye to eye. So with the kid, with boys in particular, if they're not looking, that's uncomfortable to look eye to eye. So when you're sitting with them, maybe they're doing a crossword, a color sheet, maybe you're doing Legos in your small group, whatever it is, just remember with kids it's a little bit different. So we want our small group leaders to have everything they need to do what they need to do, whether that's their opening activity. And we'll talk about that. Perfect world ratios, talking about adult to child ratio. For kindergarten and first grade, it'd be 6 children to 1 adult. For second and third, it'd be 8 children to 1 adult. And then for fourth and fifth, 10 children to 1 adult. I said perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. So we're not always going to have this, but that's kind of what you're going for with our kids. Now, our student volunteers are incredible. If you have a teenager, if you can round them up to bring them to club to you, or if they're with you, if they're teachers' kids that are coming to the school after school, that would be something to recruit if any of those kids are Christian kids to come. I have one of our kids from our church, he became a Christian at Good News Club at Grayson Elementary all through high school. When it wasn't baseball season, he volunteered at club. And now he's on the Red Sox. He's like, you know, on the farm team, but like, But he loved those kids, and those kids loved him, and we just empowered him. Now, did he lead a perfect club? Had he read the lesson before he got there? Absolutely not. But he loved those kids, and we just championed him and those student volunteers. I would always at Christmas give my student volunteers a Chick-fil-A card, something that they would enjoy, but I loved my high school volunteers. All right, so capturing their attention. We've kind of talked about this already a little bit. Let me get back to where we are. So as kids are coming in, you're telling them where to put their book bag, you're getting them, however you do club, how we would do club, they would get to a table with their small group leaders. That's your opening activity. I would suggest changing up the opening activity every month or so, just so it's something different. But the kids do like things that don't change either. So what doesn't change is where they go when they first walk in. But maybe what changes is the little thing they're doing. Manipulatives, blocks, the Legos, the connects, those kind of things. If you could get someone to donate those, or if you could, that's just an easy thing to bring, especially, like I said, for boys, that makes them feel more comfortable with that. The goal of the opening activity is you know the kid's name and you know their thing, so just keep that in mind. When they leave to go to large group, do you know their name and do you know their thing? Okay? And the reason why, because when they come back the next week, you can call them by name and you can say, how did baseball go this week? How was your game? You know, you might be the only one in their life that's interested in what they're interested in. So that's really important. You're building a relationship. Okay, so another good thing to have is those whiteboards with expo markers. Teachers use these a lot, but that would be another good thing to have. All right, so large group. You're going to, if you teach the large group lesson, and I know it's super, if you have a full-time job, there's a lot of other things, but you cannot read the lesson, okay? You cannot read it. You cannot, I'm going to say it 1,000 times, and if your large group leader is reading the lesson, you need to, in a nice way, say, you cannot read the lesson, okay? I just don't know how else to say it. That will not capture your child's attention. Now, some things that I have done to make it, so you know, if you're going to, I think Leanne's teaching the Learning the Bible Study lesson, and she's an amazing teacher, but you study the lesson ahead of time, you read it in the Bible, you practice teaching it, like you get all those things. So you're sitting there, you're gonna have a million distractions. I usually get my most distracted child that's going to distract the rest of the kids to sit next to me and hold the book. I do. And they love it, typically, and I can redirect them in a nice way. But a lot of times you're using the slides, but sometimes you use a book. I went through the Good News Club teaching evangelism, child evangelism fellowship teaching. So when I did that class, I got a lot of the actual physical materials, which I know they have, which I enjoyed, like the book that you go through. Kids love story time. They do love that, but you cannot read the story. You have to read it. Now, you do want to have your Bible in front of you. You want them to see that the lesson came from the Bible, of course, that kind of thing. So your worship, everyone, your worship time should be engaging and fun and jump around. Let them get their energy out. I always tell the kids too, this is not the time to go to the bathroom. Okay, that was supposed to happen during small group, but they always want to go during the story. You know, no. I just say ahead of time, this is not when we're going to the bathroom, all right? So you're making it fun, you're telling the story, you're using excitement, you are not reading it from the paper, okay? So that, I know it, And if you're the large group teacher and you know you don't have time to prepare, ask someone else to teach. Bottom line, like, you really want the kids. One thing that we have done in the past is, instead of a normal volunteer, we'll have someone from our church that's a good teacher that doesn't volunteer every week to come in and just teach the lesson that day. And that has worked in the past. So once large group is as fun as you can make it, lively, all those things. And I'll get to distractions in a minute. Then after the large group, they go back to their small group. And this is the time where, if you're a small group leader, you're applying the lesson, okay? So you have the review questions, you know what they are, and there's so many different games that are provided in the material that you can do the game with the kids. They love a competition. They love to keep score. I always try to make it tie at the end. Y'all do it how you want it to do. But anyway, they do retain the story, and they love the review game and the review questions. You're one-on-one with the kids. You know their name. You know their thing. You're talking to them. If you have a child that's maybe like my daughter, that's crashing and ADHD in club, give them a buddy. If there is someone, just someone that can redirect them, sit them right next to you, proximity. Get them to run the errand, to pick up all the cups that have been destroyed in the game. Like, you know who your distracted child is, and anything you can do to redirect. I will say this. It's probably when my daughter was in kindergarten, so lots of years ago. I was leading the club at Grayson Elementary, and our 5th grade boys group was our really big group, and there was one kid in particular that probably had, we don't know what their special needs are, no one tells us, we don't get the 504 plan, we don't get the IEP, but he probably had like oppositional defiant, I don't know what it was, but he wore us out at club, like legit, and I would go home from club discouraged and sad. And so even like your best tricks may not work on every kid. And what I should have done, which I didn't do, I should have asked for help from the principal or from the school counselor in a nice way. Is there any advice you can give me? What helps with this kid? Like, I should have, instead of going home every day discouraged or every club, it knocked the wind out of me every time. So you are going to have those cases. It doesn't mean that you're failing as a teacher or as a Good News Club volunteer. It's just there are some kids that need more help than you can provide. And so that is something to think about. Small groups, it'd be great to have the same volunteer for the small group each time. That keeps them engaged because you know their name and you know their thing. Give them a job. That helps with distractions. You really don't want to single out your most distracted. We don't, you know how it is, but slyly you want to get them to be your buddy and your helper. Redirecting, y'all know this if you've been a teacher before. Miss Paula is just distracting everybody. So proximity, getting close to them, just a gentle touch on their shoulder, just letting, and that sometimes sets them down, settles them down. But just proximity helps, giving them something for their hands to do, helping, anything like that can help with distraction. And I'm going to finish up with this, and then if anyone wants to ask questions, you can. Healthy volunteers. You are the volunteers. You, in order for you to feel good about coming to Good News Club, there are certain things that you need. You need to be prayed for. which hopefully your club leader is doing. You need to pray for the other people in your group. Connect with each other through the week. Share with each other the incredible God story, because sometimes that motivates you. Like, club was terrible today, but 3rd grade Johnny prayed to receive Christ, and it makes everything we did worth it. I would really encourage you to share good stories with each other, connect during the week. If you do have something going on, let your team know. Last year, so this time, well, spring of 2021, both of my parents were in the hospital. I was more or less living with my parents, taking care of them. Praise God, they're independent today and doing all right. But I had a lot on my plate. If I kept that from my other friends volunteering with me, that would have been difficult, because I wasn't necessarily myself. A lot of you have difficult things going on. You're serving because God has called you to. Let the people in your club support you. Y'all become a family. Y'all become a group that takes care of each other. And then just the last thing, the strong parent communication. And I'm gonna tell y'all one of my favorite stories that has come out of Good News Club. So years ago at Grayson Elementary, I'd probably say 4 or 5 years ago, I was privileged to get to lead that club, and we had lots of kiddos. And at the end, after the large group lesson, you get to talk with the children that have questions. And so one particular little girl, her name's Kelsey, she had lots of questions. Her family isn't in church, but she wanted to know what it meant to become a Christian. So we got to sit down. The Lord allowed me to sit down and share the gospel with her. She prayed. She received Christ. So I really tried at Carpool Line to make an eye-to-eye any child who had made a decision or something significant at club, at Carpool, I would look at the parent eye-to-eye, your child, and explain. So with this child, Kelsey, I went to the car and I looked at the mom and I said, your daughter Kelsey accepted Christ today. Here's and I would, you give them the tract that goes with it. This is what it means. And then I gave her a card inviting her to church, because Kelsey had told me her family didn't go to church. So I invite the family to church, not knowing anything that's going on with the family. Well, then a few weeks later, little sister Riley, same thing at club. And Kelsey was probably third, she was probably first. So at Car Rider, I go to the mom, and I could tell mom was struggling, working mom, doing the best she could, put it that way. And invite the mom to church again. I can't remember how far down the road it was that the mom did come to church, but she comes to church, she brings the girls. After church, she says to me, I know both of my kids have prayed the prayer to accept Christ. I've never done that. Can you explain the gospel to me? So I got to have the opportunity to share the gospel with her. She accepts Christ. Now, what I didn't know is that her husband was in jail. And her husband, she did not know what the end result was going to be with her husband. If he was going to clean up his act, if he was going to get off drugs, get off alcohol, whatever, But she said, I have got to make a change in my life for my girl's sake. I want to live for God. So fast forward a few months, the dad gets out of jail. He comes to church. The mom, the dad, the oldest daughter were baptized. The little one wasn't quite ready yet. And 4 years later, he leads our Celebrate Recovery at our church, which is amazing. It's my favorite story ever. And God allowed us to start Celebrate Recovery a couple years at our church. I helped get it off the ground, but knew I wanted to pass it on And the Lord raised him up to do it because of Good News Club. Because of the opportunity I had with that one child, and then the parent connection. You can't miss that. Sometimes you're going to miss them in Car Rider, so you either make a plan to see them the next week or you give them a call. But the good parent, just like your son loved Good News Club, coming home happy. You want to know as a parent what's going on because you're not there for the hour. And so the good parent communication, you never know what God's going to do. So I really want to encourage y'all to know the child's name, know their thing, and as God allows you to get to know them, I agree that these kids are going through things that we can't even imagine what they're going through. And the Lord is placing you in their life for such a time as this. The Lord knew that our world would look like this in 2022, and that you would be in these public schools to love on these kids that are confused and bombarded with a million different other things. So God is going to use you this year. I'm super excited about that. So I think we have just a couple more minutes. Does anyone have any questions before I close this up? Yes.
We have about 25 maybe at the most. Come the 17th, they sit on the floor, but it's always my point. I'm recognizing that this is the end of school. They want to wiggle. Some of them want to lay down. They're not necessarily distracting the other. Or, hey, everybody sit up and listen.
For the lesson time?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be one way or the other.
I agree.
Once you give them an inch.
I agree. So what I would make sure is that you're doing some large group games before they sit down. They get the wiggles out, their worship, and then when they sit down, I would say, okay, this is just 10 minutes. We're all gonna sit up. We're not touching each other. I'm like a dictator when I'm teaching. Like, come on, sit up, sit up. I'm not just lay everywhere. But if you can provide all that fun stuff to get the wiggles out, I would require them to sit up. Unless you know there's a special need, then you would let them sit in the back with a volunteer.
Okay. Would you give them a choice? Some maybe want to sit in the chair and some want to sit on the floor?
No. I would make them all sit on the floor. All one or the other. That's me. Yeah. That's just how I can manage it.
And too, in our group, we had a good person that led us music, and they did a lot of action with the music. So by the time, they had some opening game music, I mean, they should be able to sit.
Yeah. It is. They'll get away with anything, though. I mean, they'll try. I hear you.
Yourself,
yeah.
Sort of disciplining, and then it becomes not fun or something. I thought, if they one wants to relax, one wants to,
I would try to get them all sitting up. Some of the things that I've done is that I call on the kids that are sitting up well. Then I also bribe them. Like, I have a treat that I'm giving all the kids that are listening when at the end, you're going to get the treat.
What I did it one time. I had one of the leaders watching the group, and she would write down who was really listening, and maybe there was 3 that day, and they got to pull a marble out of the thing and get a treat.
Yes, that would be good.
But then I would be sure it was 3 more the next time or whatever.
Yes, that works.
Problem.
It's classroom management. So that's basically what it is. So think back to your best favorite teacher. What did they do to keep and what works for a few weeks isn't going to keep working. So you keep it going, but yeah, it's hard.
What do you think about visuals in the story? I had one friend, I use lots of visuals. One other leader said, well, that can be distracting. They're looking at the visual and they're not focusing on the lesson. But
I disagree.
I do too.
Visual, some kids are visual, some are auditory, some are kinetic. So you're wanting, I love the visual. I love a big book. There's a really great book. It's called The Big Story Bible Story Book. There's a red one, the Pray and Play Bible. That's what it is. It's this big. Pray and Play Bible. There's a red one and there's a blue one. You can order them on Amazon or somewhere, but they have most all of the main stories are in this Pray and Play Bible, and you could look at the table of contents and see it, and they are great because you don't even have to teach to that, but they're seeing the pictures. I like the physical thing. I know the screen, the kids like the screen too, but maybe I'm old school, yeah.
It's not a question, but a comment on that. And one thing that we've stumbled on, if you're familiar with the Jesus Storybook Bible, the videos of those stories are on YouTube. And so when we've had crossover there, they're like 5 minutes or whatever,
Awesome.
but the kids love them. It's a quick story and then you can come in behind it. But my question is maybe for the room, and I always love asking the question, what's your takeaway? So for us, like, what are you walking out with that Jennifer presented? What's kind of a main thought or idea that's kind of a good nugget just for us? What's the takeaway? Yeah. Okay.
What you thinking, you can do this.
Yeah.
God's got it, but you can do it.
Yeah.
Get to know and love your kids.
Yes.
We don't use name tags, but Linda's my teaching partner, and some of these names are foreign names, and it's really hard, and it's very embarrassing when you can't get it right. And you write them all down and you practice them, and then you practiced it wrong. And so I think Linda and I might just say we're going to use name tags. That would help both of us. Would it be rude to put their thing underneath it and say, you're a dancer, or it would be okay to?
Yeah, let them fill it out.
Okay.
What is your name? What's your thing? That's a great idea. It'll help you, and they'll get to know each other. That's awesome. Okay, it's time. All right, let me pray and we'll be done. Thank you so much. Dear God, we're so grateful for this time together. We're thankful for these incredible people. God, we know that you have equipped them to do this, to lead these children, God. And I just pray that in the clubs this year that many children would come to have a relationship with you, God. We know that you are wanting us to reach this next generation, God, to pass it on. Just like Jesus called on the disciples to carry out his mission, and they were the plan. There was no plan B. God, I believe that each one of us, that we are part of your plan to reach the next generation, and I pray that we can do that and you would equip us to do so. Thank you for this time together in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.